DAX Optimizer can analyze all the measures of your model and find the cost, the estimated cost in terms of CPU, how much time the user will wait for the response of the report, and the RAM cost, how much RAM is required to run the measure in a particular report. Knowing these numbers can be important to make your model more efficient and to serve more users with the same capacity. For example, let's take a look at the list of the measures of a model we analyzed. We can extend the list of the measures to all the measures, not only those that have issues. And we can enable an expert view where we can see more detailed information about the CPU cost and the RAM cost. What does it mean? The CPU cost is an information that compares a measure with other measures in order to understand the relative impact of each measure compared to the others. The biggest cost, if the biggest cost in CPU in waiting time for the user, is that of the measures that have the biggest number here. And by analyzing this other column, we can detect how much of that time is caused by something that is code internal to that measure and not code of other measures that could be referenced within the measure itself. The same is true for the RAM. The difference is that the RAM cost is something that is the price you pay when the user executes a report that contains that measure. Again, is a relative number that is useful to compare one measure to another. You want to focus your effort on the measure that have the biggest number and the measure that have a relativity cost for the internal code of the measure that is bigger compared to others. So even when you cannot solve a performance issue, you can still detect which measures are more expensive in your model, and the RAM cost is important not just for the execution time of the individual user, but for the scalability of your solution. You have a certain capacity for Fabric or Power BI, and this capacity determines a fixed amount of RAM that can be used at query time. If multiple users execute the same report or different reports at the same time, each user will consume a certain amount of RAM. And when they run at the same time, they may exceed the amount of RAM available, and they could require additional capacity for executing that kind of workload. This means that optimizing your model, reducing the RAM cost, has a big impact on the scalability of your solution. You can serve more users at the same time with the same capacity. And of course, usually the cost in RAM is also related to the waiting time and the cost in CPU, so usually you have a win-win situation where when you optimize your model, reducing the cost in RAM and reducing the cost in CPU.